Good evening and welcome to Q&A. As you can hear, coming to you live from Melbourne. Facing your questions tonight, the Minister for Communications, Senator Stephen Conroy, the Head of Melbourne University Press, Louise Adler, Monash University academic Susan Carland, controversial newspaper columnist Andrew Bolt, and the Shadow Minister for Climate Change, Environment and Water, Greg Hunt. Please welcome our panel. Well, for the start of the footy season and Formula One this weekend, it's an enormous week for Melbourne, not least because Q&A is here for the very first time. We've been inundated with questions, but we're ready to take more. Q&A is live from 9:30 Eastern Summer Time. You can send your questions on the web at abc.net.au/Q&A or by SMS at 19755222. Well, Q&A viewers will know that our guests attract questions on their special areas of influence and expertise. Greenhouse questions for the Climate Minister, economic questions for the Treasurer, but we've never seen anything like the avalanche that Stephen Conroy has generated. Let me show you. Stephen Conroy. That is half of them. We couldn't print them up, we used too much paper. With more than 2,000 people sending web and video questions about the government's proposals to censor and filter the internet. Our studio audience is also keen to quiz the Minister on this subject, so let's start with the very first question, and it's from Stephen Davies.
Why is the federal government planning on imposing a compulsory, secret and flawed internet filtering scheme on us? When everyone else agrees, it won't actually do what it was supposedly designed to do and block child porn. Is banning a lengthy list of other fringe websites really what it takes to get Steve Fielding on side?
Now, before we go to the Minister on that question, I want to hear from our other panellists. It is tonight's hottest topic. Let's start with Louise Adler.
Well, I share this young man's concerns. I'm not sure why we need a mandatory filtering service. I understand that the Howard government put in place a net nanny, and if I understand correctly, only 35,000 families chose to download it. So I'm wondering where the anxiety, the moral panic around what we see, how we choose what we view, and where that comes from and what you're responding to. I mean, frankly, maybe I'm a sort of woman of a certain age, but, you know, all I get is Svetlana from Florida sort of begging me to look at her photos, and I've really failed. Just me. No, or penis extensions, and, you know, neither are particularly relevant. And I sort of think, so I'm able to manage my own relationship to the internet pretty successfully. I'm not inundated with this material. And I think if we're concerned about pedophilia, then we should be looking to the causes of pedophilia, and that's what we should be talking about. Instead, we seem to me to be exercised, or you seem to be preoccupied by the pipes by which this material is distributed. So that's my problem, I guess, in the first instance.
Hold on, Stephen Conroy. Andrew Bolt, let's hear from you. Where do you stand on this attempt to censor the internet?
Well, I think a lot of people are getting very worried about something that hasn't actually been decided or rolled out. I think it's incredible, and it's not as if there's only one right at stake, which is the right to masturbate over photos of children being raped. I mean, that's not the only right at stake here. There's another right, and that's the right to protect children. And I think it all comes down to how does it actually work in practice, and if it does indeed do what some of the people are getting hyper about, you know, slow internet speeds by 87%, or stop people from looking at legitimate political sites, I'm sure I would bet my bottom dollar that Steve won't approve it.
Susan Carland.
Well, it's funny, the only emails I seem to get is from Nigerian princes trying to give me money, so I guess maybe the filter's not going to do me any favours. I'm actually the mother of two small children, one of whom is a 5-year-old daughter who loves to use the internet. But I have concerns about what seems to be coming out. However, the biggest issue I have is that we don't have a lot of information about it. We're not actually sure what is the criteria that is being used to judge how you will ban websites and who's going to be doing the judging. So from what we understand from the WikiLeaks and the list that ACMA seem to be providing, there has been instances of seemingly benign websites that have been blocked, like the Queensland Dentist. So I guess I'd be reassured if I could hear what the criteria will be used and how that will be judged and who will be implementing that.
Greg Hunt.
Well, I guess I feel a little jealous. I had thought that Svetlana was only dealing with me, so that's a disappointment. But the two serious points I'd make are this. Firstly, you have to deal with the pornographers. If you've got people who are engaged in child pornography, that is a deep and serious problem. And my view is that we need to increase the resources for tracking down the people who will spam the pornography, be engaged in the pornography, increase the penalties and the resources for dealing with those who are acting illegally. But as to monitoring at home, that starts with mum and dad. That starts with the family. As the father of a young child, you know, you cannot abrogate that responsibility. So my view is tough on those who breach the laws, make it doubly tough laws, but secondly, I would also put in place the opportunity to help mums and dads with net alerts and other things. Stephen might say not enough took it up, but but having a blanket closure of a very large portion of the internet doesn't appear as if that's going to be effective.
Stephen Conroy, is that what you're proposing to do? And is, as the questioner, the original questioner implied, is the compulsory filter flawed, secretive and doomed to failure?
Well, look, there's probably 3 or 4 different aspects. If I could separate out the technology argument firstly from the issue around what should or shouldn't be blocked. The trial is to establish what is possible. In the past, there's been a number of trials into this area, and they've found, as has been much publicised, and it was a report done by the previous government, that depending on which type of filter technology you use a number of years ago, you could slow the internet down by anywhere between 3% and 87%. So that's where the famous 87% figure comes from. So if you sat down and went, what way could I set out to completely destroy the net, you'd pick the 87%. Now, common sense says you won't do that, but a political campaign is a political campaign, so truth is often the first casualty in these sorts of things. Now, the great part about Moore's law is that the capacity of technology doubles every 2 years. So technology has improved significantly since the last trial. So we're not afraid to have a trial to find out. A lot of people seem to be afraid to have a trial to see whether or not technology has advanced sufficiently. We'll be guided by that trial. We've always said consistently we'll be guided by the trial. On the issue which a lot of people are getting very concerned about what we're going to block, I think, and I think Greg would agree with this, that there is a compelling argument to deal with refused classification material. That's material like websites that promote incest, websites that promote rape, websites that promote child pornography or child abuse. And a lot of people have got confused thinking we've already introduced this. The debate you're seeing over the last few weeks, and in particular the last week or so, is actually about the existing system that's been in place for 9 years. The blacklist has existed for 9 years, and it hasn't destroyed the net, it hasn't caused mass panic. The classification board, which classify books and television programs and other published media, are largely responsible for the list. And at the moment, there's also a process of complaints from individuals. So an individual can make a complaint about the site, and then it can be judged by a bureaucrat at ACMA, and this is the existing system. And nothing has changed since Labor came to power, and nothing is planned to be changed in the near future. And what you're seeing is a process by an ACMA official, that's the Australian Communications Media Authority, apologies for using the acronyms, but they look at these things and they can also be tested by the classification board. The same people who do the testing on TV, radio and books
Stephen,
and magazines now.
Let me interrupt you there, because we've actually got a video comment and a question from Jim Stewart of Melbourne that addresses one of the points about this blacklist. Let's hear from him.
Senator Conroy, quick question for you. What makes you think your government can possibly censor the internet when the whole industry has told you it's a bit like trying to use chicken wire for a dam wall? To give you a quick example of that, WikiLeaks, this is a search on Google on for the word WikiLeaks over the last month. And just for the Australian pages, we find there are 11,200 pages talking about WikiLeaks in the last month. Now, I've been on the internet for the last 17 years, and I'd never even heard about WikiLeaks, the whistleblower site, until last week, until your government blacklisted it.